I am very well aware that I am not the first person to make a video on this movie, and yes, I most certainly won't be the last person to make a video on this movie either, but I also acknowledge that there is nothing I could say about this movie. Absolutely nothing I could say about this movie that no other YouTuber has said about this movie beforehand. There is nothing new for me to add to the table, nothing new for me to add to the discussion. So why am I bothering making this video? I don't know. I watched the movie that was really fucking bad, and now I'm over here talking about why it's really fucking bad. I don't care if I'm just rehashing what everyone else thinks. This movie is garbage. Today we are looking at Foodfight, an animated movie that is widely considered one of the worst, if not the worst animated movie ever made, and one of the worst movies ever made in general. Now, if you're watching this video, there's a 99% chance you're already aware of this movie and why it's so infamous. You're also likely aware of the history surrounding this movie. This movie started development all the way back in the early 2000s, and it was supposed to come out in 2003. Supposedly, the original files for this movie were stolen. I don't know. I remember reading something that, as it turns out, no, the files for the original version of the movie were never stolen. I think they were, like, deleted for some reason, and the whole thing that they were stolen was, like, an urban legend. I have no idea, okay? I'm not here to give a history lesson on this movie. I'm here to explain why I think this movie is shitty, okay? There's a 50-minute long documentary that a YouTube channel made about the movie and its development. You can go and check that out if you want. A link will be in the description below. That will give you a far better retelling of the movie's history than I could ever hope to give you, okay? Bro, the one thing that I will bring up about the original version of Foodfight that interests me to no end is there was going to be a Foodfight video game. I'm not joking about that. There was going to be a Foodfight tie-in game for the GameCube, PS2, and Game Boy Advance, and it never came out, obviously. And for a long time, the only proof of its existence, the only thing that we had of the game, was this small 3-second clip from someone documenting E3 2006. This tiny little footage is all we had of the Foodfight video game for a long time. Last year, in 2024, I don't know if this was around the same time that the documentary came out or not, more footage of the game would leak online. I don't know if I can show it given the fact that it's leaked and none of it was released officially to my knowledge, but I'm not taking that risk. I'm not going to show it off. I'm sorry. No prototypes of the game are available currently. I don't think there's anything for the Game Boy Advance version, the supposed GBA version of the game. That version is just still a complete mystery. But yes, there was going to be a game based on Foodfight, and it never came out for better or worse, and I can only imagine what this game is like. So as I mentioned before, Foodfight started development in the early 2000s, and it was supposed to come out in 2003, and then it was supposed to come out in 2005, and then it was supposed to come out in 2007, and then finally it came out in 2012, direct-to-video in the US. In some parts of the world, I believe this movie had a theatrical release, which I cannot imagine what that would be like. Bro, I cannot imagine watching this movie in theaters. Holy crap, man. And ever since it came out, it has garnered a reputation for being one of the worst movies ever made, and quite possibly the worst animated movie ever made, with tons of YouTubers talking about it. JonTron made a video on this movie, and given the whopping 20 million views that his video garnered, I want to imagine he was the one that made the movie infamous. Or at the very least, he heavily contributed to the movie garnering its infamous reputation that it has today. The Nostalgia Critic made a video on this movie. My biggest YouTube inspiration, I Hate Everything, made a video on this movie. Moist Critical made a video on this movie. Virtually every YouTuber in existence has made a video on this movie. Again, I am well aware I am not the first person to talk about this movie, and I'm not going to be the last person, but still, there isn't much for me to say about this movie that none of these people have already said about the movie. So why am I making a video on this movie despite the fact that it's such an overdone, stale topic? Well, let me explain. Most of the time, I like to stay away from infamous stuff. I like to stay away from stuff that tons and tons of other channels have already talked about. I much rather look at weird, obscure garbage that no other channel has ever talked about instead. A while back, I made a video on Miracle in Toyland, this extremely obscure, really Christmas movie from the early 2000s that I vaguely remember watching as a kid. And let me tell you something, there is a very noticeable difference between me talking about this movie versus me talking about Foodfight. There is a difference between the two. Sometimes though, I watch something that is infamous, and yeah, it's infamous, it's a dead horse, there's nothing new for me to say about it that no one else has already said about it, but I don't care about it because what I end up watching is so f***ing offensively bad that it's like I don't care if I just rehash what other people have said about it. I bought this f***ing movie on DVD. I'm not joking. I bought this movie on DVD because I thought it would be funny. I thought it would be like a funny, like, joke novelty item, you know? Haha, it would be funny if I owned one of the worst movies ever made on DVD, just casually in my possession. I was obviously very well aware of this movie. I had watched tons and tons of reviews of this movie, but I had this feeling at the same time that there was a difference between watching a review of an infamous bad movie versus watching the infamous bad movie yourself, especially watching it officially via home media. Most people that would watch Foodfight, they'd probably just sail the 7 seas for it. I mean, the whole f***ing movie is easy to find on YouTube. You could watch it for free on YouTube. But given how infamous this movie was, I wanted to be a little extra special towards it, if you know what I mean. And so I went out of my way to buy the damn movie on DVD. I wanted to watch this movie on my TV, just as God intended. I am never making that mistake again. Holy shit. This was an awful idea. I kid you not, I am currently in the process of returning my DVD. I already submitted the eBay return, and yeah, I can't wait to ship this out and get it out of my possession, because I cannot keep this. I have my standards, okay? I have my limits. I bought Foodfight knowing that it was going to be a bad movie, but I went into it expecting it to be a funny bad movie. And yes, there are a few funny bad moments in the movie, but they're not enough to save the experience of this movie. This is one of the most painful movies I've ever seen. I don't care if this video just consists of me rehashing whatever the Mr. Enter said about the movie. I don't care. This movie is hot garbage. I don't care if this video is unoriginal or derivative. I'm making it anyways. Okay, so let's get the elephant in the room out of the way first when it comes to Foodfight. The animation. Now, one of the biggest reasons why this movie is hated is because of its really f***ing ugly looking animation. And I gotta say, yeah, the movie is ugly, but Jesus Christ, I had no idea it was this ugly. You don't truly realize how ugly of a movie Foodfight is unless you watch it from the official DVD on your TV screen. Then, and only then, will you truly comprehend how ugly this movie is. I find it highly ironic that this is a movie that focuses on food. I mean, obviously it's in the name, Foodfight. There are tons of products placed throughout this movie, and yet it's such an unappealing movie that, like, you could very easily lose your appetite watching this movie. You watch this movie and it's like, nope, I never want to eat again. That. The genuinely ugly, unappealing designs of some of the characters, it just makes you question, like, why? Like, I get it. This movie went through development hell. This movie had, I believe, a low budget. I don't know, but I don't care. There's no excuse at all. Some of these characters were made deliberately ugly, is what it looks like. You look at this character and it's like, no, this character was made to look ugly on purpose. The presumably low budget that this movie had and the development hell that it went through do not change anything. They do not excuse the fact that this character is ugly. The way this character looks, it's like she was deliberately made to be ugly. Oh yeah, and there's also tons and tons of gross out jokes throughout the movie, which is something that should not be in a movie about food. This is another thing where it's like, no, the development hell of this movie has nothing to do with that. The people behind this movie should have known, no, you don't put toilet humor of any kind in a movie that heavily focuses on food. Bro, I tried sitting through this movie and it was just genuinely so fucking revolting to sit through. The gross out jokes combined with just the really ugly looking animation. Sometimes you have food appear and it gets like thrown or broken or whatever and it like explodes into like this like, I don't know, like substance or something, and it just looks so unappealing, seriously. This is a movie that would easily turn you away from eating for the rest of your life. I had dinner not long after watching this movie for the first and only time, and I gotta say, dinner felt really off to me that night. This movie done up Costco pizza for me. Now, how the hell are you gonna do that, man? How are you gonna do that? How are you going to ruin S-tier pizza for me like that, man? You know, some shit's just unforgivable, you know? How are you gonna ruin Costco pizza for me like that, man? How are you gonna do that? The movie is described as being a Toy Story in a supermarket. During the day, all of the food mascots and products and whatever, they just stay isolated, I guess. During the night, when the supermarket closes though, the market becomes a city and all of the mascots come out. Many of them are original characters made for this movie, but there are real mascots included in this movie. Mr. Clean is in this movie. The California Raisins are in this movie. Charlie the Tuna is in this movie. That sort of thing. Apparently there were gonna be even more food mascots that would appear in the original version of the movie. Characters like Chester Cheetah and the M&Ms were gonna appear at some point in this movie, but they were luckily spared from being in this monstrosity. So the movie revolves around everyone's favorite dog who dresses up like Indiana Jones and is voiced by Charlie Sheen, Dex Dog Detective. So Dex Dog Detective plans on proposing to his girlfriend, Sunshine Goodness, who's the mascot of a fictional raisin brand. And I know that people like to ridicule this movie for a lot of reasons, you know, haha, the animation is bad and whatever, but like, I really want to take time to analyze how fucking weird these two characters are together. So you have this like Indiana Jones dog trying to marry this fucking cat girl. She looks like a normal human girl, but she has cat ears for some reason. Sunshine Goodness is supposed to be the mascot of a raisin brand, because nothing says raisins more than human girl with cat ears, you know? It's like, what the f***? Dex tries to propose to Sunshine, but unfortunately he is unable to. A few months later, we cut to the supermarket during the day where things are about to change inside of it. And this is where we get one of the very, very, very few funny bad moments in this movie. That being the introduction scene of Mr. Clipboard. Mr. Clipboard is easily the best thing about this movie, and it's a shame that he's only in 3 scenes in the movie, and he's also not even a real person. He's a fucking robot that's being controlled by the main villain of the movie, the evil Brand X lady, whatever. But this scene where you have Mr. Clipboard just moving erratically, and you cannot tell if they deliberately made this character move this way, or if it's because the animation is just that bad. And you could see poor Christopher Lloyd trying to save this movie as much as he can with this character. And then Mr. Clipboard stomps on a bag of chips and the store owner expresses grief over the bag of chips, and it's so fucking stupid. I wish the whole movie was as funny as this one scene. Genuinely. I regret buying this movie on DVD very much, and I cannot wait to return it. But the sole thing that made owning this godforsaken movie on DVD worth it was seeing that walking animation on my TV screen. That was the only thing that made owning this movie on DVD worth it. So conveniently, around the same time Brand X enters the supermarket, Sunshine Goodness disappears without a trace, and subsequently Dex retires from being a detective. His best friend, Daredevil Dan, a squirrel pilot, I guess, I don't know, tries to convince him to go back to being a detective, but unfortunately, Dex is unable to. Without sunshine goodness, he's nothing. Now, it's in this part where we get another kind of funny thing about this movie, and now I don't know if this is like unironically funny or if it's just like ironically funny, but it's a little detail that I find interesting nonetheless. Now, this is obviously a movie about food, and so subsequently there are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of food-related puns, supermarket puns, jokes, stuff like that. Most of these are really corny, some of them are really cringy, but these are probably the only like kind of funny ones, and maybe they're not even like funny for the right reasons. So in Dex's office, there are these posters for food-themed parodies of famous movies. For example, you could see It's a Wonderful Lime, which is obviously a parody of It's a Wonderful Life. You have Dial B for Burger, which is a parody of Dial M for Murder, that sort of thing. And then randomly, this caught me off guard. There's a poster, 12 Hungry Men, in his office, and the first time I watched this movie, I was like, why is there a 12 Angry Men reference in Foodfight? But that's not all. At the beginning of the movie, when the supermarket is closing down and the city is popping up, there's a poster you could see. There's like a sign that says Requiem for a Whipped Cream. And it's like, why is there a Requiem for a Dream reference in Foodfight of all things? I have never seen this movie before in my life, but I've heard it's really fucking dark and depressing, so you know what, sure, let's just reference it in our crappy food movie for kids. I mean, to be fair, it's not surprising that something like this is referenced in a movie for kids, given the fact that one of the main reasons this movie is criticized is the large amount of innuendos and adult jokes that are in this movie. Now, innuendos in kids media is not a new thing. I'm not gonna be like, sensitive or whatever about this, but there are far too many of these jokes in the movie, and yeah, it does make it pretty uncomfortable. The main person representing Brand X is like this hot woman, I guess. There's a scene where like she's in Dex's office and she's like wearing like a plaid skirt and they're like dancing, and it's really uncomfortable to watch. It's a mixture of several different things. The really bad animation, the fact that again you have this human character dancing with a dog, and the fact that this is supposed to be a movie for stupid babies. What the is this doing in a movie like this? Of course though, where the movie goes too far with its out-of-place adult imagery is Brand X itself. Another reason why this movie is so infamous is because of the way that Brand X is represented. You will notice that they bear a striking resemblance to the German man with the funny mustache from the 1940s. And now this is just something that I have to wonder. Was it always like this from the beginning? Remember, this movie was in development for a very long time, since the early 2000s, but something that I don't think anyone else has ever brought up is the possibility of like, was Brand X always like this? Did they always look like this in the movie's development? Either from the very beginning, they were designed to look like the German man with the funny mustache, or that wasn't the case at the beginning. At some point in development, they decided, you know what? We need to find a better way to convey that Brand X is evil. We need to find a better way to convey that these are the bad guys. These are the villains. At what point in development did they decide on that? I have no idea. We will likely never know. But then again, there's also the possibility that they were always like this from the very beginning. I don't know which option concerns me more. I really don't. All this does is make me even more curious as to what the original version of this movie looked like. There is a small chance that maybe the original version of the movie was good, or at least significantly better than what we got, but maybe the movie was just never gonna be good to begin with. Maybe this whole movie was just cursed from the start. The funny thing is, even before the movie came out, even back when this movie was announced, it received criticism, with people claiming that this movie will be product placement taken to the next level, which, that does make sense. There is an extra corporate feel to the movie when compared to something like Toy Story or Wreck-It Ralph, which are similar in a lot of different ways. The funny thing is, there is so much stuff stuff that is wrong with this movie that you could very easily forget just how corporate it feels. I find it weirdly ironic that this is probably the most product placement filled movie ever made, and yet you don't focus on the product placement because there's so much that is wrong with this movie that honestly, the excessive product placement is the least of its problems. Okay, but like going back to the German man with funny mustache imagery, I have to remind myself as well, not only was this movie in development for a very long time, but there was also going to be a video game based on this movie. And that makes me even more curious about whether this imagery was in the movie from the very beginning or not. Could you imagine an alternate universe where it's 2006 and you go to GameStop and you find this crappy shovelware PS2 game for kids based on an animated movie, and you decide to buy it, and you have Dex Detective, you get to play as Dex Detective over here, beating up the villains that are very clearly based on the German man with the funny mustache, which, don't get me wrong, that would be extremely based to see. It would be based to have a game where you would beat them up, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, it just feels absurd, the idea of seeing that in a kid's game based on an animated movie. And alright, fine, we'll talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm reusing this joke, what are you gonna do about it? The main villains of this movie are Brand X, which is this very dull, soulless, boring product. One of the only other funny bad moments in this movie is a scene where they infiltrate Dex's club and they start singing their theme song. They're like, Brand X, it's simple and plain. Brand X, it's different but all the same. And then the other mascots retaliate by singing the French national anthem for some reason, and it's so stupid and so absurd that I can't help but laugh at it. Again, if the rest of the movie was like this scene, it would be so much better, but unfortunately it's not. But anyways, going back on topic, as we all know, in 2022 Elon Musk bought Twitter, and then in 2023 he rebranded it to X. As I've mentioned numerous times before, Brand X's imagery bears a huge resemblance to the German man with the funny mustache from the 1940s. And as we all know, during the inauguration earlier this year, Elon Musk did the German man with the funny mustache salute. Lawrence, buddy, I need to ask, what the how were you able to do this, man? How the hell did your crappy animated movie that was supposed to come out in 2003 but instead came out in 2012 somehow manage to predict 2025? Explain that to me, Lawrence. Explain that to me. Alright, so besides that, there actually isn't really all that much for me to say about the movie's plot. Most of it is very, generic and straightforward. Good guys stop bad guys. The mascots managed to stop Brand X. It turns out that they had kidnapped Sunshine Goodness, and so they managed to rescue her, and they kick out Brand X, they recall Brand X, and everyone lives happily ever after. Dex and Sunshine get married, and God, I cannot imagine what their offspring would look like. That. And the movie ends just like that. Again, I know this movie is a very stale topic. There isn't really a whole lot for me to say about this movie that nobody else has already said about it. But Jesus Christ, I was not expecting this movie to be this bad. I bought this movie as a joke. I bought it for novelty purposes. I thought it would be funny to own this infamous bad movie in my possession. And then I started watching the movie thinking it was going to be a so bad it's good disaster piece. And it's yeah, there are a few funny bad moments in the movie, but they're not enough to save the movie. They sure as hell are not enough to justify owning the movie on DVD. Almost immediately, I planned on returning the movie. Thankfully, the eBay listing that I bought this movie from, they allowed returns. So I was like, alright, sure, we're getting this thing out of my house. That. The first half of this video was recorded before I returned the movie. As of March 26, I've officially returned the movie. It is no longer in my possession. Goodbye and good riddance. If you're a fan of bad movies like myself, I do not recommend you watch this movie, okay? I just do not recommend it. Trust me when I say there is a massive, massive difference between watching a YouTube review of an infamous movie versus watching the infamous movie yourself. No matter how many reviews you watch of Foodfight, you will never be able to truly comprehend how bad Foodfight is unless you watch it yourself, especially on DVD as was intended. I don't want to be a cop-out and say like this is the worst animated movie I've ever seen, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but like I don't have a choice, you know? It feels too safe and predictable to say that like yeah, this is the worst animated movie I've ever seen, but that's how I feel about it. This is the worst animated movie I've ever seen. Well, actually, no, the worst animated movie I've ever seen so far. Given some of the very obscure animated garbage that I willingly choose to torture myself with, I unfortunately don't doubt the possibility that there somehow exists an animated movie out there that's worse than Foodfight. I don't like reviewing infamous stuff, but I was left with no choice with this movie. I'm well aware that there is nothing new for me to say about this movie that hasn't been said by literally every other YouTuber on the planet, but I don't care. If for whatever reason you wanted to see me specifically review this highly infamous movie that every other YouTuber has already talked about, well, today is your lucky day, I guess. Today is your lucky day. Maybe if you're extra lucky, one day I'll do a review of Norma the North, or the Emoji Movie, or any Video Brinquedo movie, you know? I've reviewed one dead horse, I might as well review all of the dead horses. You get what I'm saying? Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.